And relax.
There we go. So it's Senate Appropriations, January 29th. We're going through the Budget Adjustment Act. Today we have several agencies, but right now it's the Department of Public Safety. And we have Mr. Hollenbeck here to go through the changes that their department has and the governors recommend. And so if you could introduce yourself for the record and then walk us through the changes, that would be great.
Sure, thank you. I'm Rick Hollenbeck. I'm the Director of Administration at Public Safety. And if you should have in front of you a document that says Fiscal Year 2025 Budget Adjustment Form, Department of Public Safety. With the chair's permission, I'll jump right into that document.
Okay, does everybody have that or have access to it? Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, so let me just frame this a little bit first. We have two different funding sources of public safety that are experiencing a projected shortfall at the end of fiscal 25. The first one is our indirect cost rate, which is in the interdepartmental fund, but we draw it from a variety of federal and special fund sources based on our approved indirect cost rate. And we're just not able to draw to the level of the expenses that we currently have. The other being the Criminal History Record Check Fund, which is in the Criminal Justice Services Appropriation, but more specifically the Vermont Crime Information Center. That fund source is the revenue comes from Vermont criminal conviction reports. Anyone can go online, pay $30 if there is a criminal conviction report. They'll be able to purchase that for the $30. And so that is also, it was projecting to be $107,000 in the whole when we built the budget, because we did add in the fiscal 25 appropriations bill $107,000 to that fund from the general fund. The projection has widened, and now we're projecting a little over $1 million shortfall in that fund. And I'll pause there in case there's any questions on either fund description.
Can you just talk a little bit about the reason for the shortfall?
Sure. For the indirect cost rate, the revenue has fluctuated. So that's one of the factors. There's some years where we've been able to draw a sufficient amount. I would say most years we did run a deficit within that, looking at just the revenue expenses within that year. Salaries and internal service fees have been a big driver in the cost increase in the administration appropriation. And that is
so
what
the revenue in isn't compensating for what's needed.
Correct.
Okay.
So where is the indirect, or is it just part of these whole? I don't see the indirect.
It's in the interdepartmental transfer fund. That's where we take revenue and spend our indirect cost pool.
Okay. But you put it into these other areas where you need it, where it had to. Are you changing your indirect rate also for the future?
The indirect rate is negotiated every year, so we submit a new one to the federal government every December. And that rate it's fluctuated a lot too. We've had rates as low as 17.7, or I'm sorry, 15.5, and as high as 25.3. So it's fluctuated a lot. So that's part of that.
What is it now?
The rate that 25.3 is the rate for 25, and we just submitted a proposed rate for 26 of 17.7. So you can see there's a lot of fluctuation in the year. But that's not the end all be all in drawing the funds, because it also depends on what federal grants we have. For example, if we have a lot of funding, like public assistance for a big disaster, then there's more federal funds to draw our rate on it. Would you like me to jump right into the line items at this point?
Sure.
So starting with appropriation number 1, if you look at line item 507-600, there's a $75,000 general fund up. This also is represented as a $75,000 down in the Criminal Justice Services appropriation in the special fund, because that's where it was originally budgeted. Specifically, what this is the Spillman CAD RMS system. It was our legacy system before we moved to the Valcor system developed by Crosswind. And we need to keep it alive for the legacy data that's in there. And that's what this $75,000 pays for.
Okay. Senator Watson?
Sorry, I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So it's $75,000 to keep legacy data alive.
Correct.
Any plans to offboard that data to a more modern system?
I think that might have been part of the original plan. I'm not sure if it's technologically possible, but I could bring that question to our agency of digital services and get you an answer.
That would be great. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, the next one?
So the next one is our live CAD RMS system developed by Crosswind. The software itself is called Valcor. $702,000 increase in general funds. And that sort of ties to another line item in the criminal justice services appropriation, but that line item is only $606,000 because that was under budgeted. The $702,000 is the contracted amount, so we know that's the amount that the invoice is for fiscal 25. Not sure why we missed that when we budgeted it, but that's why the two numbers don't match.
Okay.
Moving down to the operating expenses, these, rather than just increases, are, well, actually the others aren't increases, they're shifts from other appropriations. But you see the shifting for these operating expenses in the same line because they're coming from our interdepartmental fund, which, as I mentioned, is the indirect cost revenue, and shifting over to the general fund. We have the insurance, which is an internal service fee, vision, ADS, and human resources, which are all internal service fees. I wouldn't look at these as increases to the internal service fee in fiscal 25. These are line items that I had picked to shift those fundings, just knowing that we have an overall shortfall. In our interdepartmental funding, we have most of the ISFs are out of the administration appropriation. There are also personal services or salaries and benefits that come out of that interdepartmental fund. So I wouldn't look at it as a particular line item increases. It's just an overall shortfall in that fund, and these are the line items that I had picked.
Okay, straightforward.
So with the chair's permission, I'll move down to the criminal justice services appropriation. The very top line, BCIC director and deputy director salary and benefits. That's a shift from the special fund, the criminal history record check fund, to the general fund to help alleviate some of that current year deficit. And then the next two line items are the ones I've already spoken about because they tie to the two above in general funds and the administration appropriation for both Spillman and Crosswind.
Okay. Seems to make sense, and there's nothing in the language part really here that's different, or?
I don't believe we had any proposed language changes, just the fund changes.
It just kind of explains these numbers, yeah. Okay. Well, that's pretty straightforward. Any questions? Yes, Senator Watson?
Yeah, so from my time across the hall last session, working on dispatch issues, I just recalling that my understanding had been that Valcor was not CAD compliant, but this is this Crosswind CAD new, or so is Valcor is CAD compatible at this point?
So Crosswind is the vendor that developed the software they call Valcor, and I'll tell you just what I've heard is that it is a true CAD RMS system for law enforcement, but I've heard it's not for the fire service and EMS. I can get you some follow up on that if you'd like.
Okay, and just to put it out, like I'll just say this as a statement in general, like I would, I recognize that CAD systems are more expensive, but they are, you know, at least in my opinion, and I'm just one voice, like the direction that we should be going, but, so I'd love to see us go in that direction, particularly in what is available for fire and EMS. But that's a larger conversation,
Yeah.
not for necessarily right now. But thank you. So
Sure.
appreciate it.
And I apologize, I failed to mention that that is a statewide system. It's not just the state law enforcement, it's also municipalities, sheriffs, the entirety.
And I believe VSP was the last to join into the Valcor system.
Oh, yeah,
Whereas the
yeah.
rest of us were.
We're,
It started in Burlington,
Yeah.
Manchester,
yeah, right.
But not for fire and rescue.
Correct.
They're still using their own.
Yeah, I couldn't speak to what they're using, but again, I'd be happy to have someone follow up with the committee on that.
That's, sure. Whatever you
Good
need.
information to provide.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, well, there's no other questions unless you have any other information you'd like to provide about your BAA changes.
That is everything I had. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming over. So we are gonna hear from Agency of Education at 3 o'clock, so we might as well adjourn until 3.